Keanu Reeves, the man who has redefined Hollywood with his unmatched charisma and unshakable kindness, was about to stumble into the most jaw-dropping, controversial chapter of his life. Something so wild, so utterly insane happened to him that it's almost too big to believe, yet it's the greatest, most shocking tale you'll ever hear. Picture this: a single moment so charged with emotion, so dripping with intrigue, that it would hook the entire world and leave them begging for more. What unfolded was beyond imagination, an exaggerated, heart-pounding saga that would expose secrets so dark they'd make your head spin. But here's the kicker: you won't believe what he did next, or how it all started with one outrageous act that no one saw coming. The sun blazed over Los Angeles, casting a golden glow across the sprawling streets as the annual charity motorcycle ride kicked off with electrifying energy. Hundreds of gleaming bikes lined up, their engines growling in anticipation, all gathered to raise funds for children's hospitals, a cause close to the heart of one man in particular, Keanu Reeves. Known as much for his humility as his Hollywood stardom, Keanu arrived on his custom-built motorcycle, a masterpiece of black steel and chrome that roared with quiet power. Clad in a worn leather jacket and faded jeans, he blended into the crowd of riders, his presence understated yet magnetic. The air buzzed with excitement as fans cheered, their voices rising into a wave of adoration for the man who seemed to embody kindness itself. The convoy rolled out, a thunderous parade weaving through the city with Keanu leading the charge. His bike cut through the wind, a symbol of freedom and passion, its sleek lines catching the sunlight in flashes of brilliance. Riders flanked him, their engines harmonizing in a symphony of horsepower while spectators lined the roads, snapping photos and waving signs. For a moment, everything was perfect, a celebration of goodwill, unity, and the open road. This isn't just a story, it's a revelation. And if you want to see how far it goes, subscribe now before it disappears. But perfection is fleeting, and chaos was lurking just beneath the surface. Among the riders was Alex, a notorious woke influencer whose neon-painted motorcycle screamed for attention. Alex was a whirlwind of controversy, a social media titan with millions of followers hanging on their every provocative word. Their reputation preceded them: outspoken, unpredictable, and always at the center of some scandal. Today, they rode with a smirk, their bike weaving through the pack as if daring someone to challenge their presence. The group reached a rest stop halfway through the ride, a sprawling lot where riders dismounted to stretch their legs and mingle with fans. Keanu parked his motorcycle carefully, its polished surface reflecting the midday sun like a mirror. He stepped away, drawn into the crowd by eager supporters clamoring for selfies and autographs. His smile was warm, his demeanor calm as he signed a young girl's poster, oblivious to the storm brewing just a few feet away. In that unguarded moment, Alex struck. With a calculated stride, they approached Keanu's bike, their movements swift and deliberate. A metallic screech pierced the air as Alex dragged a jagged key across the side of the motorcycle, carving deep, vicious scratches into the pristine paint. The damage wasn't subtle. It was a blatant, aggressive act, the gouges forming a crude, chaotic pattern that mocked the bike's elegance. Alex stepped back, their expression unreadable, then melted into the crowd as if nothing had happened. Keanu returned minutes later, his eyes falling on the wreckage of his beloved machine. The scratches glared up at him, a brutal violation of something sacred. His heart sank, a flicker of pain crossing his face. This wasn't just a bike to him. It was a piece of his soul, a companion through years of triumphs and trials. But instead of erupting in anger, Keanu stood still, his breathing steady, his gaze fixed on the damage. The crowd around him buzzed with confusion, then outrage as whispers spread like wildfire. Cameras flashed, capturing the scene from every angle while reporters surged forward, their voices overlapping in a frenzy. The media seized the moment, turning it into a viral spectacle within hours. Headlines screamed across the internet. Woke influencer vandalizes Keanu Reeves' bike at charity event. Speculation exploded. Was it jealousy? A publicity stunt? A personal vendetta? Keanu, ever the enigma, faced the swarm of microphones with unshakable calm. His voice cut through the chaos, low and measured, as he brushed off the incident with a single sentence. "It's just a bike. The kids were helping matter more." The crowd hushed, awed by his grace, but behind those steady eyes something shifted. That night, alone in his modest home, Keanu sat in the dim glow of a single lamp, the ruined motorcycle parked in his garage like a wounded beast. He traced the scratches with his fingers, his mind turning over the day's events. The damage wasn't random. The pattern hinted at something intentional, almost symbolic. A warning, perhaps, or a challenge. He leaned back, his thoughts sharpening into focus. This wasn't just about Alex. Something bigger was at play, something tied to the influencer's world, a world Keanu knew all too well from his decades in Hollywood. He opened his laptop, pulling up everything he could find on Alex. Hours passed as he sifted through social media posts, interviews, and rumors, his eyes narrowing at the connections that began to emerge. Alex wasn't just a loudmouth with a following. They were linked to some of the most powerful, shadowy figures in the entertainment industry. Whispers of a secret society surfaced, a cabal rumored to control Hollywood from behind closed doors, deciding who rose and who fell with ruthless precision. The scratches on his bike weren't an act of spite. They were a message from that world, a world Keanu had always avoided. But avoidance wasn't an option anymore. Keanu closed his laptop, his jaw tightening with resolve. He wasn't the type to back down from a fight, especially not when it came knocking on his door or carving up his bike. This was personal now, and he intended to find out why. The charity ride had been the spark, but what lay ahead was a firestorm he'd ignite himself. Little did he know, this single act of vandalism was the first thread in a tapestry of secrets so vast, so explosive. It would unravel everything he thought he knew about the industry he'd called home for decades. Keanu Reeves stood in the center of the ballroom, the flickering lights casting long shadows across the sea of masked faces. The sudden darkness had unsettled the crowd, their murmurs rising like a tide, but Keanu's focus remained unshaken. The woman in the crimson gown, her enigmatic presence, her beckoning gesture, had vanished as swiftly as she'd appeared, leaving behind a lingering sense of mystery that gnawed at him. He wasn't sure who she was, but the flicker of recognition in his gut told him she wasn't a stranger. Not entirely. The music resumed, a slow, haunting melody that wove through the air, pulling the guests back into their performative dance. Keanu adjusted his mask, the weight of it pressing against his skin, and scanned the room once more. Alex was still there, their neon hair a beacon in the dim light, laughing with a group of sycophants who hung on their every word. Keanu's eyes narrowed. Alex was a thread in this tapestry of secrets, a connection to the vandalism of his motorcycle and the shadowy syndicate that Victor had warned him about. But the woman in crimson, she was something else, a wild card he hadn't anticipated. He moved through the crowd, his steps deliberate, avoiding the clusters of guests who whispered behind their masks. The air was thick with perfume and tension, a heady mix that made his senses sharpen. He needed to find her to understand why she'd singled him out. The syndicate's game was unfolding, and he refused to be a passive player. At the edge of the ballroom, a set of double doors led to a terrace overlooking the sprawling estate. Keanu slipped outside, the cool night air a stark contrast to the stifling opulence within. The terrace was empty, save for the faint glow of lanterns lining the railing. He leaned against the stone balustrade, his mind racing. The figure on the balcony, the woman in crimson, Alex's taunting presence. It was all connected, a puzzle he was only beginning to piece together. A soft rustle broke his reverie. He turned, his hand instinctively tightening into a fist but relaxed when he saw her. The woman in crimson emerged from the shadows, her gown shimmering faintly in the lantern light. Up close, she was striking, her posture regal, her movements fluid, as if she belonged to a world apart from the chaos inside. Her mask concealed most of her face, but her eyes, framed by those delicate feathers, held a depth that unsettled him. She didn't approach immediately. Instead, she lingered near the doorway, watching him with that same intense gaze. Keanu felt the pull again, stronger now, urging him to close the distance. But he held his ground, his own eyes locked on hers. This wasn't a moment for recklessness. He needed to understand her role in this twisted game. The woman tilted her head slightly, as if assessing him. Then, with a grace that bordered on theatrical, she stepped forward, her gloved hand brushing against the railing. She stopped a few feet away, close enough for Keanu to catch the faint scent of jasmine on the breeze. Her presence was magnetic, drawing him in despite the warning bells ringing in his mind. She didn't speak, but her silence was louder than words. Keanu's thoughts churned. Was she with the syndicate, sent to lure him deeper into their web? Or was she something else, an ally perhaps, or a defector with secrets of her own? The memory of her beckoning gesture replayed in his mind, a silent invitation he couldn't ignore. He took a step closer, his voice a low murmur in the night. He didn't ask who she was, he asked what she wanted. Her lips curved into a faint smile, barely visible beneath the mask, and she raised her hand again. This time she held something, a small silver key, its surface etched with intricate symbols. She extended it toward him, her movements deliberate, as if offering a piece of the puzzle he'd been chasing. Keanu reached for it, his fingers brushing hers as he took the key. The contact was brief, but it sent a jolt through him, a spark of something he couldn't name. He examined the key, its weight solid in his palm. It was old, worn smooth in places, and the symbols hinted at something arcane, something tied to the syndicate's hidden world. Before he could question her further, a shadow moved behind her. Keanu's head snapped up, his instincts flaring. A figure emerged from the doorway, a tall man in a dark suit, his mask a stark white that contrasted with the night. He carried himself with authority, his presence heavy and commanding. The woman stiffened, her posture shifting subtly, but she didn't turn to face the newcomer. The man's gaze settled on Keanu, cold and unyielding. There was no mistaking it. This was another piece of the syndicate, a higher rung on their ladder of power. Keanu's grip tightened on the key, his mind racing. The woman had led him here, but to what end? Was this a trap or a chance to strike back? The man stepped forward, his movements slow and deliberate. He didn't acknowledge the woman, his focus entirely on Keanu. The air grew thick with tension, the unspoken threat hanging between them. Keanu stood his ground, his defiance a silent challenge. He wasn't about to back down, not now, not when he was so close to unraveling the truth. The woman in crimson moved then, stepping aside with a fluidity that suggested she'd played her part. She cast one last glance at Keanu, her eyes unreadable, before slipping back into the shadows of the mansion. The man in the white mask didn't follow her. Instead, he tilted his head as if sizing Keanu up, weighing his worth. The silence stretched, taut and electric. Then the man turned and walked away, disappearing into the ballroom without a backward glance. Keanu was left alone on the terrace, the key still clutched in his hand, its cold metal a tangible link to the night's revelations. He looked out over the estate, the city lights twinkling in the distance. The syndicate had shown their hand, but so had he. The woman in crimson, the key, the man in the white mask, they were all pieces of a larger game, one he was determined to win. His motorcycle, Alex, the vandalism, it was personal now, and Keanu wasn't the kind of man to let a challenge go unanswered. As he slipped the key into his pocket, a new resolve settled over him. The night had given him more questions than answers, but it had also given him a path forward. The syndicate thought they could control him, intimidate him into submission. They were wrong. Keanu turned back toward the ballroom, his mind already plotting his next move. The woman in crimson was out there, and so was the truth. He'd find them both, no matter what it took. Keanu Reeves stood in the cool night air of the secluded garden, the scent of roses mingling with the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. The USB drive he'd snatched from the syndicate's command center burned a hole in his pocket, its contents a mystery that could either be his weapon or his undoing. Beside him, Alina, her crimson mask now discarded, watched him with a mixture of resolve and urgency. Her revelation about the syndicate's plans to crash the stock market, rig the upcoming election, and seize control of key industries echoed in his mind. This was no longer just about his vandalized motorcycle or a personal vendetta. It was a fight for something much bigger. "We need to move," Elena said, her voice low but firm. "They'll know you were in that room. They'll come for you." Keanu nodded, his eyes darting back to the mansion. The faint glow of the ballroom lights spilled through the windows, a facade of elegance hiding the rot within. "What's on this drive?" he asked, pulling the small device from his pocket and holding it up to the moonlight. "Hopefully enough to start unraveling their plans," Elena replied. "Financial records, encrypted communications, maybe even a list of their operatives. But we won't know until we crack it, and we can't do that here." Keanu's jaw tightened. "Then where?" "I have a safe house across town," she said. "It's off the grid, stocked with tech we can use, but getting there won't be easy. The syndicate has eyes everywhere." Before Keanu could respond, a rustle in the bushes made them both freeze. Elena's hand shot to her side where a small knife gleamed in the dim light, while Keanu instinctively shifted into a defensive stance, his years of combat training kicking in. The shadows shifted, and a figure emerged, not the man in the white mask, but a syndicate guard, his black suit blending into the night, a silenced pistol in his hand. "Step away from her, Reeves," the guard barked, his weapon trained on Keanu. "You're in over your head." Keanu's eyes narrowed. "I've heard that before." The guard smirked, but before he could pull the trigger, Elena moved like a blur. She flung her knife with deadly precision, the blade embedding itself in the guard's wrist. He yelped, dropping the gun, and Keanu seized the moment. He lunged forward, slamming his shoulder into the guard's chest and sending him crashing into a stone bench. The man groaned, dazed, as Keanu scooped up the fallen pistol and pointed it at him. "Who sent you?" Keanu demanded. The guard spat blood onto the grass, glaring up at him. "You think you can stop us? You're a dead man walking." Keanu glanced at Elena, who nodded toward the guard's radio, now crackling with static. "More will come," she said. "We need to go now." Keanu hesitated, then lowered the gun and kicked it into the bushes. "Let's move." They slipped through the garden, avoiding the main paths, until they reached a side gate half hidden by ivy. Elena produced a key of her own, smaller, simpler than the one Keanu carried, and unlocked it. Beyond the gate lay a narrow alley where a sleek black motorcycle waited, its engine gleaming under a flickering street lamp. "You ride?" Keanu asked, a faint grin tugging at his lips despite the tension. Elena smirked. "Better than you, probably." He didn't argue. She mounted the bike and Keanu slid on behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist as she gunned the engine. The motorcycle roared to life, peeling out of the alley just as shouts echoed from the garden behind them. Headlights flared in the distance, syndicate reinforcements, no doubt. But Elena wove through the city streets with expert precision, dodging traffic and taking sharp turns that left their pursuers scrambling to keep up. The wind whipped past them, carrying the faint hum of the masked ball far behind. Keanu's mind raced as fast as the bike. The syndicate had targeted him, watched him, planned to neutralize him, all because he'd unknowingly brushed too close to their operations. His charity work, his films, his public persona, somewhere in there, he'd become a threat. And now, with Elena's help, he had a chance to turn that threat into action. They crossed a bridge, the city skyline sprawling before them, and veered into a quieter district of warehouses and abandoned lots. Elena slowed the bike, pulling into a nondescript garage tucked between two crumbling buildings. The door slid shut behind them, plunging them into darkness until she flicked on a light, revealing a small but well-equipped hideout. A workbench lined one wall, cluttered with computer monitors, cables, and tools. A cot and a mini fridge sat in the corner, a testament to Elena's time spent here plotting against her former allies. She dismounted and gestured to the workbench. "Plug it in. Let's see what we've got." Keanu handed her the USB drive, and she inserted it into a laptop, her fingers flying across the keys as she bypassed its encryption. The screen flickered, then filled with files, spreadsheets, emails, maps, and grainy surveillance footage. Keanu leaned in, scanning the data. "There," he said, pointing to a folder labeled Operation Eclipse. Alina opened it, revealing a detailed plan, dates, times, and targets for a coordinated strike on the stock market, followed by a series of cyberattacks to cripple financial regulators. Another file outlined a list of political candidates the syndicate had either bribed or blackmailed, ensuring their victory in the election. Keanu's blood ran cold. This is happening in days. Alina nodded grimly. They've been building to this for years. The ball was just a distraction, a way to keep their enemies occupied while they finalized everything. "And me?" Keanu asked. "Why am I on their radar?" Alina scrolled to another file, pulling up a report with his photo pinned to it. "Your last film, the one about corporate corruption, it hit too close to home. They think you're digging into them on purpose, using your platform to expose them. The motorcycle vandalism was a warning. When you didn't back off, they escalated." Keanu clenched his fists. So Alex was just the messenger. "More like a useful idiot," Alina said. "They've got dozens like them, puppets to keep the public distracted." He paced the small room, the weight of it all settling in. "We can't let them pull this off. People will lose everything, jobs, homes, lives." "You felt that, didn't you? That was no ordinary moment. If it hit you, hit like and let's keep going." Alina met his gaze, her eyes fierce. "Then we fight back. This drive is a start, but we need more, hard evidence, witnesses, something they can't bury, and we need to move fast." Keanu stopped packing, a plan forming in his mind. "I've got contacts, people in the industry, journalists, even a few cops I trust. If we can get this to them, make it public." "It'll force the syndicate into the open," Alina finished. "They thrive in the shadows, exposure's their kryptonite." "But they'll come for us first," Keanu said, "harder than before." Alina smiled faintly, a glint of defiance in her expression. "Let them try." A sudden thud outside the garage door made them both snap to attention. Keanu grabbed the guard's knife from the workbench. Alina must have retrieved it during their escape, while she pulled a handgun from a drawer. They moved to the door, listening as footsteps crunched on gravel, accompanied by the low murmur of voices. "Perimeter's clear," someone said, "but they're here, I can feel it." It was the man in the white mask. Keanu recognized that cold, clipped tone. He'd tracked them, relentless as a bloodhound. Alina pressed a finger to her lips, then pointed to a hatch in the floor. Keanu nodded, and they slipped down into a crawlspace beneath the garage, the USB drive secure in his pocket. Above them, the door rattled as the syndicate forced their way in. The crawlspace led to a drainage tunnel, damp and narrow, but it was their only way out. They moved quickly, silently, emerging a block away in an empty lot. The city loomed around them, a battlefield waiting to erupt. "We split up," Alina whispered. "I'll draw them off. You get that drive to your people." Keanu shook his head. "We're in this together." She gripped his arm, her eyes fierce. "You're the one they're afraid of, Keanu. You've got the voice, the reach. I can handle myself. Meet me at the old theater on 5th Street midnight tomorrow. We'll regroup." Reluctantly, he agreed. She handed him her gun, just in case, and disappeared into the shadows, heading back toward the garage to lure their pursuers away. Keanu tucked the weapon into his waistband, the USB drive a lifeline in his hand. He melted into the night, determination burning in his chest. The syndicate had underestimated him, but that was their mistake. He wasn't just an actor, he was a fighter, and he'd bring them down, no matter the cost. As he vanished into the city, the man in the white mask stepped into the empty garage, his gaze sweeping the room. Finding nothing, he snarled, slamming a fist into the workbench. "Find him," he hissed to his team, "before he ruins everything." The city skyline glowed faintly under the first rays of dawn as Keanu Reeves, Alina, Alex, and Marco sped away from the docks in a battered van Alina had procured earlier that night. The USB drive and Marco's recording device sat securely in Keanu's jacket pocket, their weight a constant reminder of the stakes. The syndicate's plans to crash the market and rig the election had been stalled, their leadership momentarily scattered, but Keanu knew better than to assume victory. The man in the white mask's parting words echoed in his mind. "This isn't over, Reeves. You've just painted a target on your back." Alina's hands gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white as she navigated the quiet streets. "We've got a narrow window," she said, her voice cutting through the hum of the engine. "My FBI contact, Agent Harper, is meeting us at the downtown plaza in 30 minutes. It's public, crowded, too risky for the syndicate to try anything overt." Keanu nodded, his gaze fixed on the road ahead. "Good. We hand over the evidence, let the feds take it from there, but we need a backup plan if Harper's compromised." "She's not," Alina interrupted, her tone firm. "I've known her for years. She's one of the few left who can't be bought." Alex, slouched in the back seat, snorted. "That's what they said about me once. Look how that turned out." Marco, seated beside Alex, shot them a sidelong glance but said nothing, his scarred hands resting on his knees. The tension in the van was palpable, a mix of exhaustion and adrenaline keeping them all on edge. Keanu turned slightly, meeting Alex's eyes. "You've got a chance to prove you're more than their puppet. Don't waste it." Alex's smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of something genuine, regret maybe, or resolve. "Yeah, well, sticking it to the syndicate's a start. Let's just hope your Fed friend moves fast." The downtown plaza came into view, a sprawling open space dotted with early morning joggers, street vendors setting up their carts, and office workers clutching coffee cups. Alina parked the van a block away, and the group split up to approach from different angles, a precaution against any syndicate eyes that might be watching. Keanu pulled his hood up, keeping his movements casual but deliberate as he wove through the growing crowd. He spotted Agent Harper near the central fountain, a woman in her late 30s with sharp features and a no-nonsense posture, dressed in a plain gray coat that screamed federal agent. She stood alone, a briefcase at her feet, her eyes scanning the plaza with practiced efficiency. Keanu approached, stopping a few feet away. "Harper," he said, keeping his voice low. Her gaze locked onto him, assessing. "Reeves, I presume. Alina said you'd have something worth my time." Keanu pulled the USB drive and recording device from his pocket, handing them over. "Everything you need to bury the syndicate, financials, blackmail, their coup plans. It's all there. The recordings from their meeting at the docks an hour ago. They're planning a market crash at 9 a.m. today and an election sweep." Harper's expression didn't change as she took the items, slipping them into her coat. "If this checks out, it's a game changer, but you're not wrong to worry about leaks. The syndicate's got tendrils deep in the system." "That's why we're counting on you," Keanu said. "Move fast and keep it quiet until you've got them pinned." She gave a curt nod. "I'll take it straight to the director. We'll lock this down before they can blink." She hesitated, then added, "You've got guts, Reeves. Stay alive long enough to see this through." With that, she turned and melted into the crowd, her stride purposeful. Keanu watched her go, a mix of relief and unease settling in his chest. The evidence was out of their hands now, but the fight was far from won. He regrouped with Alina, Alex, and Marco at a nearby coffee cart, where Alina handed him a steaming cup. "She's got it," Keanu said. "Now we wait." Alina shook her head. "Not here, we're too exposed. We need to lie low until Harper makes her move." Marco cracked his knuckles, a habit Keanu was starting to recognize as his way of thinking. "There's a safe house uptown. Old syndicate spot I used back in the day. They won't look for us there." Alex raised an eyebrow. "You sure about that?" "It's been abandoned for years," Marco replied. "Trust me." With no better options, they piled back into the van and headed uptown. The safe house was a nondescript brownstone tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop, its windows boarded up and its front door reinforced with steel. Inside, it was sparse, dusty furniture, a few canned goods in the kitchen, and a single bedroom upstairs. But it would do. As they settled in, Keanu's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, expecting a burner update from Harper, but the screen displayed an unknown number. Against his better judgment, he answered. "Reeves," came a familiar voice, smooth and cold, the man in the white mask. "You think you've won, don't you?" Keanu's grip tightened on the phone. "Your empire's crumbling. The feds have everything." A low chuckle crackled through the line. "You handed them a weapon, yes, but weapons can be turned. Enjoy your little victory because it's the last you'll have. We're not just an organization, we're an idea, and ideas don't die so easily." The call cut off before Keanu could respond. He lowered the phone, his jaw tight, and relayed the conversation to the others. Alina's eyes narrowed. "He's bluffing, trying to get in your head." "Maybe," Keanu said, "but he's not wrong about one thing: they're not going to stop." Alex leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "So what's the play? Hide out here and hope the feds clean up the mess?" "No," Keanu said, his voice steady. "We take the fight to them. Harper's got the evidence, but we've got the momentum. We hit their weak points, disrupt their operations, expose their operatives, keep them off balance until the feds close the net." Marco grinned, a rare flash of enthusiasm. "I know their supply lines. Weapons, cash, data, we can cripple them in a day." Alina nodded slowly. "It's risky, but it could work. We'd need to move now before they regroup." Keanu set his coffee down, his resolve hardening. "Then let's not waste time. They want a war, we'll give them one." The group spent the next hour planning, pooling their knowledge of the syndicate's network. Marco mapped out key locations, warehouses, safe houses, and a private server farm, while Alina coordinated burner phones and weapons from a stash hidden in the safe house. Alex, surprisingly resourceful, hacked into a syndicate communication channel, feeding them real-time updates on guard movements. By mid-morning, they were ready. The first target was a weapons cache in an industrial district, a stockpile the syndicate relied on for enforcement. Keanu led the charge, moving through the facility with the same precision he'd shown at the docks. Alina and Marco flanked him, their shots covering his advance, while Alex disabled the security system from a laptop in the van. The raid was a success, crates of guns and explosives destroyed, guards neutralized, and a message sent. The syndicate wasn't untouchable. They hit 2 more targets that day, a money laundering front and a data hub, each strike weakening the organization's grip. As night fell, they returned to the safe house, battered but unbroken. Keanu's phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Harper. "Director, in. Raid starting tonight. Stay out of sight." Alina read the message over his shoulder, a rare smile breaking through her exhaustion. "We did it, Keanu. They're finished." Keanu didn't smile back. "Not yet. The man in the white mask is still out there. Until he's down, this isn't over." Marco clapped him on the shoulder. "Then we'll get him, together." Alex, sprawled on the couch, raised a mock salute. "To epic showdowns and epic bikes. You're all right, Reeves." Keanu allowed himself a small grin, his thoughts drifting to his scarred motorcycle waiting back at his garage. The syndicate had taken a lot from him, but they'd given him something too, a team, a purpose. And as the city lights flickered outside, he knew this was only the beginning. The reckoning had come, and Keanu Reeves was ready for whatever came next. The safe house hummed with a restless quiet, shadows stretching long across the floorboards. Keanu Reeves perched on the edge of a worn cot, his hands resting on his knees, fingers tracing the scars of past battles. The air carried the faint tang of gun oil and sweat, a testament to their recent victories against the syndicate. Alina moved silently nearby, her knife catching the dim light as she honed its edge with steady, practiced strokes. Marco stood by the window, his silhouette rigid, eyes scanning the darkened street below. Alex hunched over a glowing laptop, the soft clack of keys the only sound breaking the stillness. A sudden shrill beep pierced the tension. Alex's head snapped up, their face paling as lines of code reflected in their glasses. Keanu's gaze sharpened, locking onto them. Without a word, Alex turned the screen, red alerts pulsed across it, a digital heartbeat signaling doom. The syndicate's final gambit, a market crash set to unravel everything they'd fought for. Keanu rose, his presence commanding the room. Alina's knife stilled mid-motion. Marco turned from the window and Alex's fingers hovered above the keys. No words were needed. Their shared resolve crackled in the air like static. They moved as one, gathering gear with the efficiency of a well-oiled machine. Alina slipping extra blades into her boots, Marco slinging a rifle across his back, Alex securing their laptop in a padded bag. Keanu checked his pistol, the weight familiar, grounding. The van cut through the night, tires whispering against wet asphalt. The city loomed around them, its lights muted by a shroud of mist. The syndicate's headquarters rose ahead, a sleek tower of glass and steel, its surface reflecting the chaos they aimed to end. Keanu's pulse quickened, a steady drumbeat beneath his calm exterior. They stopped in an alley's shadow, the building's glow casting jagged lines across their faces. Alina slipped out first, a phantom in the dark, her movements fluid as she disabled security cameras with a flick of her wrist and a spray of paint. Marco followed, rifle low, senses alert to every rustle. Alex clutched their tech clothes, while Keanu stepped into the cold air, his breath visible in faint clouds. The side door was a slab of unyielding metal. Alex knelt, plugging a small device into the lock. A green light blinked, and the door yielded with a soft groan. Inside, the corridor stretched sterile and silent, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Keanu's boots padded soundlessly, his team fanning out behind him like extensions of his will. At a fork, they split without hesitation, Alina and Marco veering toward the lower levels, their shadows merging with the walls, Alex darting toward the server room, a lifeline to the digital battlefield. Keanu ascending a spiral staircase, each step a deliberate march toward fate. The control room awaited at the top, a cavern of flickering screens and humming machinery. Data streamed across monitors, financial charts plummeting, political maps shifting, evidence of the syndicate's chokehold on the world. At the center stood the man in the white mask, his back to Keanu, posture eerily calm. The door hissed shut behind Keanu, sealing them in. The man turned, his mask a blank void, eyes glinting with cold amusement. He raised a hand, gesturing to the screens as if presenting a masterpiece. Keanu's jaw tightened, his stance unwavering. The man's fingers brushed a control panel and the room's hum intensified, the countdown to collapse accelerating. Keanu lunged. The man met him with a sidestep, a concealed blade flashing in his grip. Steel grazed Keanu's arm as he twisted away, pain a fleeting spark he ignored. He struck back, fist connecting with the man's wrist, sending the knife clattering across the polished floor. Their fight was a storm unleashed, Keanu's disciplined strikes clashing with the man's serpentine agility. A kick to Keanu's side sent him crashing into a console, screens sparking as they cracked. He rolled, avoiding a follow-up blow, and sprang up, driving his shoulder into the man's chest. They stumbled together, a tangle of fury, toppling chairs and shattering glass. The calm in Keanu's ear buzzed faintly, Alex's voice, strained but determined, filtering through static. The server room was breached, the clock was ticking. Keanu ducked a wild swing, countering with an elbow to the man's ribs. The villain grunted, staggering, but his mask hid any sign of weakness. The room quaked, circuits overloading, lights flickering like a dying star. The man in the white mask seized Keanu's throat, slamming him against a wall of monitors. Glass splintered, cutting into Keanu's back, but his eyes burned with defiance. He gripped the man's arm, twisting until the hold broke, then delivered a knee to the gut. They grappled, the fight spilling across the room. Keanu's strength flagged, his breaths ragged, but his purpose held firm. The man pinned him briefly, mask inches from his face, breath hot and venomous. Keanu's mind flashed to the lives at stake, the city, his team, the justice he'd sworn to uphold. With a surge of will, he shoved the man off, sending him crashing into a control panel. Sparks flew and the screen stuttered. A triumphant crackle sounded in his ear. Alex had done it. The data froze, the crash halted mid-breath. The man in the white mask faltered, his confidence fracturing. Keanu seized the opening, tackling him to the floor. They wrestled amidst the wreckage, Keanu's hands closing around the man's wrists, pinning them. The mask shifted, revealing a face etched with desperation. A stranger, yet the architect of so much ruin. The building groaned, walls trembling as the self-destruct sequence kicked in. Keanu rose, dragging the man to his feet, binding his hands with a snapped cable. Elena's voice cut through the calm, sharp and urgent. Time was up. Keanu hauled the prisoner toward the exit, debris raining around them. They met the others in the lobby, where Elena and Marco stood over fallen guards, their faces streaked with sweat and dust. Alex emerged, clutching their laptop, eyes bright with exhaustion and triumph. The floor buckled beneath them, a roar building in the structure's core. They ran, Keanu pushing the man in the white mask ahead, refusing to let him slip into the chaos. The night air hit them as they burst outside, the headquarters collapsing in a thunderous plume of dust and fire. They stood amidst the wreckage, the city's pulse quickening with distant sirens. The man in the white mask sank to his knees, defeated, his empire reduced to ash. Keanu's chest heaved, his gaze lifting to the team, Elena's steady hand on her blade, Marco's quiet vigilance, Alex's relieved slump. Dawn crept over the horizon, its light cutting through the smoke. The syndicate lay broken, its leader bound, its schemes undone. Keanu's shoulders eased, the weight of the fight lifting, if only for a moment. His team gathered close, their bond unspoken but ironclad. They turned from the ruin, fading into the city's embrace, shadows among the waking streets. The war against darkness would go on, but this battle was theirs, a hard-won victory etched in the dawn's first glow. The city lay quiet under the soft glow of dawn, its streets glistening from an overnight rain. Keanu Reeves stood on the rooftop of the safe house, his silhouette framed against the rising sun. The air was crisp, tinged with the scent of damp concrete and the distant hum of early traffic. Below, the world stirred awake, oblivious to the battle that had raged through the night. The syndicate's headquarters was a smoldering ruin, their leader bound in custody, their plans shattered. Yet, as the first rays of light pierced the skyline, Keanu's expression remained pensive. Evil like the syndicate didn't vanish, it retreated, waiting for another day. Elena emerged from the stairwell, her boots crunching softly on the gravel. She joined him at the edge, her presence a steady anchor. For a moment they stood in silence, watching the city come to life. Marco and Alex were downstairs, gathering the last of their gear, but here it was just the two of them, caught between the chaos they'd survived and the future stretching out ahead. Keanu's mind drifted back to the beginning, the charity ride for the children's hospital, the roar of motorcycles, the vandalism that had sparked this journey. It seemed a lifetime ago, a simpler time before the threads of corruption had pulled him into this war. Now, with the dust settling, he felt the weight of how far they'd come. Elena broke the silence, her voice quiet but firm. "We stopped them, Keanu. The market's safe, the election secure. We won." He nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "For now." She turned to him, studying his face. "You think they'll come back?" His jaw tightened. "They always do, but we'll be ready." A faint smile curved her lips. "Together." He met her eyes, the bond between them solidifying in the morning light. "Together." The handover unfolded in a dimly lit parking garage, a stark contrast to the chaos of the night before. Agent Harper stood waiting, flanked by her team, her posture all business. Keanu handed her a small, encrypted hard drive, the final piece of evidence exposing the syndicate's crimes. Her gloved hand closed around it, her face unreadable. "You've done more than we could have asked," Harper said, her tone clipped but genuine. "Raids are already underway. The syndicate's finished." Keanu glanced toward the sliver of sunlight creeping through the garage entrance. "Make sure it sticks." Harper nodded. "We will, but you should know they had allies in high places. This won't be clean." Alina stepped forward, her stance defiant. "Then we'll keep fighting, whatever it takes." For a brief moment, Harper's gaze softened. "Stay safe, all of you." She turned and disappeared into the shadows, her team trailing behind. The hard drive was gone, but its burden lingered in Keanu's chest. Justice was a slow machine, but they'd set it in motion. For now, that was enough. Back at the safe house, the team packed in near silence, the weight of their victory settling over them. Marco slung his rifle over his shoulder, his scarred hands moving with practiced ease. "I'm done with this life," he said, his voice rough but resolute. "Got a cabin up north. Gonna fish, maybe write a book, something boring." Alex snorted, zipping up their laptop bag. "You, boring, I'll believe it when I see it." Marco's lips twitched into a rare smile. "Visit me, bring your tech, might need help with the Wi-Fi." Alex rolled their eyes but grinned. "Deal, but I've got plans too. A cybersecurity firm offered me a job, legit work for once." Keanu raised an eyebrow, turning over a new leaf. Alex shrugged, a spark of their old mischief returning. "Figure I owe the world a few good deeds, plus it pays better." Alina laughed, slinging her bag over her shoulder. "And you, Keanu, back to Hollywood." He paused, the idea of returning to his old life feeling distant after all they'd endured. "Not yet. There's something I need to do first." The children's hospital glowed under the midday sun, its courtyard alive with the sound of laughter and the squeak of swings. Keanu parked his motorcycle, scarred but polished, a mirror of his own resilience, and walked through the gates. The charity ride had raised enough to fund a new wing, and today marked the groundbreaking ceremony. He'd been invited as the guest of honor, but he slipped in quietly, avoiding the spotlight. A young girl spotted him, her eyes lighting up. "Mr. Reeves," she shouted, racing over with a crayon drawing clutched in her hands. It depicted a motorcycle, bold and colorful, with a stick figure Keanu riding into the sunset. He knelt down, accepting the drawing with a warm smile. "This is incredible. You've got real talent." She beamed, then pointed to his bike outside. "Is that the one from the ride, the one that got hurt?" Keanu's smile deepened. "Yeah, but it's tough, just like you." The girl giggled and darted back to her friends, leaving Keanu with a quiet warmth in his chest. Alina stood nearby, watching with a gentle smile. She didn't need to say anything, this moment said it all. This was why they'd fought, why they'd risked everything, for the future they'd safeguarded. The open road stretched out before them, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through a landscape bathed in gold and blue. Keanu's motorcycle growled beneath him, its familiar rumble a comfort. Alina rode beside him on her own bike, her hair streaming in the wind, her laughter rising above the engine's roar. They had no set destination, just the freedom of the road and the promise of what lay ahead. The syndicate was broken, its shadows dispersed, but Keanu knew darkness would rise again. When it did, he'd be there, ready, steady, unbroken. For now, though, there was peace, a hard-earned stillness that settled deep within him. As the city faded into the distance, he glanced at Alina, her eyes reflecting the same unspoken resolve. Together, they rode into the light. If you enjoyed this story, there's another video on screen right now. Go ahead and give it a look for an even more astonishing tale. And don't forget, we'll have many more uplifting and dramatic stories coming your way. So make sure you subscribe to our channel, that way you'll never miss our newest uploads.